Gravitas Global Headlines.
Azerbaijani and Armenian forces exchanged heavy rocket and artillery fire as the fighting over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh intensified.
It is dangerous for all those people involved, but is of course also something which is of great concern for the whole region and for all NATO allies.
NATO has called for a ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh. NATO has said it expected Turkey, which is a key ally of Azerbaijan, to use its considerable influence to reduce tensions instead of fueling the conflict. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, his daughter Mariam, and other top leaders of the opposition PMLN party have been charged with sedition and other serious cases for allegedly conspiring against the institutions of the army and judiciary. The FIR accuses the PMLN Supremo Nawaz Sharif of conspiring against Pakistan's prestigious institutions by making provocative speeches and declaring Pakistan a state of hooligans. The 2020 BRICS Summit will be held on the 17th of November via video conference. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping will be face-to-face virtually for the first time since the standoff at the line of actual control began. The World Health Organization has said that roughly 1 in 10 people may have been infected by COVID-19 around the world. The health body said the world is heading towards the most difficult period as the disease continues to spread. Meanwhile, India's Ministry of Education has released detailed guidelines for reopening schools and colleges in the country, allowing schools and colleges to restart in a limited manner from the 15th of October. The states have the power to decide whether they want to reopen schools. Students are permitted to go to school strictly on voluntary basis and will have to carry a consent slip from their parents. Women in Iran will be able to take part in official powerlifting competitions for the first time. According to the Iranian Federation of Bodybuilding, the country will have an official female team of powerlifting athletes. Women in Iran were restricted from competing in official powerlifting contests, but now government officials have issued a license to remove such restrictions. Americans Harvey Alter and Charles Rice, together with Briton Michael Houghton, have won the Nobel Medicine Prize for the discovery of the hepatitis C virus. The three were honored for their decisive contribution to the fight against blood-borne hepatitis. Arab Tech, the construction giant which built the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, is set to shut down. The company is going into liquidation due to an untenable financial situation, which was worsened by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In a setback to Indian ride-hailing firm Ola, London's Public Transport Authority has stripped the company of its London operating license, saying that the taxi app was not fit and proper to hold one, citing concerns over passenger safety. 4-1 at half-time and proceeded to concede 7 goals in any match season. Farms Championship in Jackson, Mississippi. The 40-year-old ended Sunday's final round with the share of the lead, but
An Islam for France. That's what Emmanuel Macron wants. The French president has proposed new rules for the practitioners of Islam in his country. Macron says he wants to rein in the radicals, make Islam more compatible with the French constitution. Muslims say they're losing their identity in the name of assimilation. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you about Emmanuel Macron's battle with Islamism. The announcement came last week. French President Macron went to a suburb in Paris and delivered a speech. He attacked Islamist separatism and announced his plans to tackle it. Now, the French president has been talking about this for a while now. But this is for the first time that he has revealed the specifics. He said that separatist elements want to create a parallel order and he will not let that happen. Macron's message was fairly simple. Religion cannot be above the constitution and every citizen needs to follow the law.
Je demande à tout citoyen, quelle que soit sa religion ou pas,
I'm asking each citizen, whether they follow a religion or not, to absolutely respect all laws of the Republic. And there is in this radical Islam. Since this is what the issue is, let's take it on board and let's name it. There's a will, a demand, an organized method to go against the laws of the Republic and create a parallel order based on other values. Developing a separatist society, first off, with the goal of ultimately taking total control, and that's what they are doing, gradually, by rejecting the freedom of expression, freedom of thought, the right to blasphemy, which can insidiously move towards radicalization.
Insidieusement, on conduit à se radicaliser.
Who wouldn't support such an idea? Constitution above religion. All citizens equal by law. And yet, Macron's plan has triggered a controversy. Critics say the French president wants to regulate the practice of Islam in his country. 4 proposals stand out. There will be closer scrutiny on the financing of mosques in France, especially when the money comes from abroad. Homeschooling will be restricted. This is to prevent the creation of Islamic schools. And it's not a small matter. According to one report, more than 50,000 French children are homeschooled. Macron also wants to end the practice of getting foreign imams. They're often accused of preaching an outdated or extreme version of Islam in France. So the government will create a certificate program for French imams. Associations that solicit public funds will be made to sign a charter on secularism. This will apply to all religions, we understand, but it's being seen as an effort to counter extremists within the Muslim community in particular. Now, 2 statements of the French president are making headlines. One, he has admitted that the French government allowed Islamism to spread in the country. And 2, he said that the religion of Islam, itself faces a crisis.
Islam is a religion that is in crisis today all over the world. We don't just see it in our country. It is a deep crisis that is linked to tensions between fundamentalism, precisely religious and political projects, which, as we can see in all parts of the world, are leading to radicalism, even in countries where Islam is the majority religion.
Macron's plan is making global headlines because the implications go beyond France. This new policy may give a whole new template for Europe to follow. Major European countries are struggling with radical Islam, and while they want to remain secular and inclusive, in some way or the other, they have stepped up their scrutiny of Muslim communities. Let me give you examples. In 2018, Austria closed 7 mosques and expelled 60 imams. In 2015, Austria had banned foreign funding of religious institutions. This essentially cut off the flow of foreign funds to mosques. In February this year, the Netherlands was discussing similar curbs. Last year, Germany began training imams locally. The German government launched a pilot project for this. This is an effort to reduce foreign influence on religious leaders of Islam. Italy has taken a firmer approach. Between 2015 and 2018, 16 Islamic preachers were expelled from the country. They were believed to be radicals. What the French president has proposed is basically a combination of all these moves and more. He has created one consolidated playbook. Last week, President Macron outlined his proposals, his plans. The law will formally be presented in December for the French Parliament to approve. Now, if Macron is successful, it may not take much time for his European allies to follow. The French president's plan could have global implications, and this could impact Muslim countries, which is why some of them are already slamming France, like Egypt. Egypt's Sunni Islamic institution Al-Azhar has denounced Macron's remarks. It has called the French president racist, accused him of hate speech. The Turkish Foreign Ministry shot off a statement too. It says that Macron's bill will lead to grave consequences and fuel xenophobia, racism and Islamophobia in Europe. The president's critics say it's all about politics. Emmanuel Macron is trying to appeal to right-wing voters ahead of the 2022 presidential election. Political or not, this move may prove to be a game changer as Europe struggles to assimilate its growing Muslim population. Let me give you another reason why France's case is so significant. The country is the fountainhead of secularism, or laïcité as the French call it. Islam is the second most widely professed religion in France, just behind Christianity. France is one of the largest number of Muslims in the Western world, and it has an uneasy relationship with Islam. Our next report tells you why.
French opposition leader Marine Le Pen has compared Muslims praying in the streets to Nazi occupation. And Christine Lang, a member of Emmanuel Macron's party, walked out of a parliamentary hearing in September because a student union leader decided to wear a veil for the hearing. In France, the old tradition of secularism is clashing with the new reality of the country. Laïcité or secularism, the defining principle of the French Republic, is now under a severe challenge from Islam. By law, the church and the state have been separate in France for more than 100 years now, which means laws of a religion cannot be above the constitution. That principle has been the driving force for several new rules that many Muslims have described as Islamophobic. In 2010, France banned the burqa. A year later, street prayers on Fridays were banned too. 3 years back, Muslim organizations sued the state. They wanted meals without pork in schools. Now the French president wants Islam to be fully compatible with French laws. According to him, most Muslims want this too.
There are millions of fellow citizens, French people who believe, who don't believe. Millions who believe in Islam and who live according to the laws of the Republic and who want to live as French citizens. What we must fight is the separatism that I have just mentioned.
With these words, President Macron launched his mission to rein in political Islam in February. For those living in France, this was no surprise. France has been a target of multiple terrorist attacks in recent years. In 2015, there was mass shooting at the offices of Charlie Hebdo, known for its provocative takes against Islam. In the same year, terrorists killed 130 people in another mass shooting. In 2016, a terrorist in Nice rammed his truck into the crowds on Bastille Day. More than 30 people had died in the attack. Public sentiment after this attack turned against radical Islam. Muslim-dominated areas have been on the radar of lawmakers. Some experts are calling specific areas the lost territories of the Republic. Allegedly, government control is weak in these regions, and crime and Islamism thrive in some quarters. These are obvious red flags for the law enforcement agencies. But Muslims fear their communities are under attack. A spokesperson of the Muslim Council said Macron is promoting a divisive culture war. Yasser Louati, a French Muslim activist, tweeted that the repression of Muslims has been a threat. Now it is a promise. Macron says the anti-separatism law is an attempt to erase divisions within the society. But if the pushback from the Muslim communities continues, this proposed law will only reinforce them. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Macron wants to push religion out of education. He wants to take religion out of the public sector in France. He is a democratically elected leader of a sovereign and secular country, and he is well within his rights to legislate. The bill is designed to strengthen France's bedrock law. of 1905, one that officially separates the church and the state. It's all fair on paper and in theory, but is it really possible to separate religion from the state, even for a country as fiercely secular as France? When Charlie Hebdo republished its cartoons on the Prophet Muhammad, President Macron said, "The French have the right to blaspheme." In July this year, Turkey's President Erdogan converted the Hagia Sophia into a mosque. Turkey defended the move by citing sovereignty. Last month, Sri Lanka discussed a ban on cow slaughter. The move was seen in favor of the majority Buddhists. These are all secular countries, so that's what they call themselves. And yet, they have laws that tend to favor one religion and upset another. And this is true even in the most secular of states. France is no exception. The French constitution says, and I'm quoting, "France shall be a secular republic. It shall ensure the equality of all citizens before the law, without distinction of origin, race or religion. France believes in the right to have an opinion on religion. It believes in the right to blaspheme. It believes in separating the state from religion. But its application looks almost impossible." There are two big challenges. First is foreign interference, and the second is secularism versus Islamic terrorism. France has the highest number of Muslims in Europe, 6 million of them. And they make up at least 8% of the French population. French Muslims are balkanized, but their mosques, organizations and schools often receive funding from Muslim countries. Between the 1960s and the 1990s, Morocco, Algeria and Turkey sent paid imams to France. They also funded prayer rooms and organized national federation. Why did they do all of this? Because these countries hoped that France's Muslims will one day return home. France thought the same. It saw Muslims as temporary migrants, so it did not really mind interference from Muslim countries. But things began to change in the late 1900s. France realized the growing power of Islamic movements. There were some triggers. In 1979, there was a revolution in Iran. In 1982, Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat was assassinated. In 1989, the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan. These were crucial moments. By the 1990s, France began exerting control over its Muslim population. It was not easy. There were hurdles like the Muslim World League. The Saudi-based league promotes Saudi-style Islamic beliefs. It funded a number of mosques in the 1980s and 90s. The same World League also funds the Tablighi Jamaat, by the way, and the Salafists. And all of these groups used to operate freely in France's Muslim neighborhoods. Another challenge was Algeria. It was reluctant to give up its role as the caretaker of the Great Mosque of Paris. In the year 2000, France tried to contain the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood. Early in Macron's career, he declared that he will, quote-unquote, set down markers for the entire way in which Islam is organized in France. In 2018, he began consulting experts on how to create a framework for financing places of worship and for collecting donation. He also wanted to vet and train imams working in France. The idea was to reform religious organizations and end foreign funds pouring into the Muslim community. What was the need for all of this? Islamic terrorism. The threat is real in France more than anywhere else. Since 2013, at least 1,700 French nationals have joined the ISIS, Islamic State. France has seen several attacks orchestrated by the country's Muslim citizens, be it the Charlie Hebdo attack in 2015 or the recent attack on 2 people with a meat cleaver. Macron entered office in 2015. It was on the heels of the November 2015 terror attacks. 90 people were killed. The ISIS had claimed responsibility. His task was cut out, countering Islamic terrorism in his country. Like former President of France, François Hollande, Emmanuel Macron decided to work towards creating a French Islam, a brand that is unique to France. What is not unique is this attempt. Saudi Arabia has done it, a Saudi version of Islam, they have it. Turkey has done it, and now China is trying to do the same. It is cynicizing Islam in concentration camps of Xinjiang. But unlike China, France is a civilized society, a country where the government is held accountable. So it is introducing new laws to tailor Islam. President Emmanuel Macron's new bill is aimed at creating a French Islam. This is not France trying to separate the state from religion. This is France codifying Islam to create a brand particular to this country. And since we're on the subject of a difficult relationship with Islam, let's talk about Myanmar. The country is going through a significant phase, an election in about a month from now, and a crucial geopolitical realignment. Strangled by China, Myanmar is expanding its relationship with India. This includes both diplomatic ties and the military relationship. An Indian delegation visited Naypyidaw, the capital of Myanmar. India's Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla travelled with the Indian Army Chief General M.M. Naravne. This alone should tell you why this bilateral engagement is so special. It is rare for the Army Chief to go on a bilateral visit with a Foreign Secretary, especially in the middle of a border standoff with a country like China. And it would be safe to say that when India and Myanmar sat down to talk, the elephant in the room was the dragon. In focus were two subjects: infrastructure and sovereignty. The Indian delegation's visit comes against the backdrop of two events, two major setbacks for China. First, the Myanmar government decided to split up the new Yangon City project, a project that would connect the Yunnan province in China to central Myanmar. Why is it a setback? Because China was to build it single-handedly. A Chinese company had backed the contract, but now Myanmar plans to open this up to other international partners. So China is losing its exclusivity. China is also losing the trust of Myanmar's military. In the month of June, a spokesperson of Myanmar's military accused China of arming rebel groups. Myanmar reportedly has said that China is supplying sophisticated military weapons to rebels. They fear this could create an insurgency. Myanmar was ruled by the military for 49 years, and even today, the generals enjoy immense influence over the civilian government. And China has lost favor with the generals of Myanmar. It's increasingly becoming clear. Myanmar wants to break free from China's grip, and India seems willing to help. The Foreign Secretary and the Army Chief met with Myanmar's top civil and military leadership. Their aim was to take the ties forward in areas like security and connectivity. One of the key projects is the operationalization of Myanmar's Sitwe port. This will boost the country's connectivity with India's northeastern states. Reports say both sides want to open up the port by next year. On the security front, the focus was on tackling the rebels. The defense forces of both countries have been trying to expand their relationship. In 2017, India discussed training of Myanmar sailors at India's elite defense institutions. In the same year, India and Myanmar held their first bilateral military exercises. Now, the security establishment on both sides needs to fight the threat of insurgency together. Let me show you something. On your screen right now is a report by the European Foundation for South Asian Studies. It talks about China's weapon supplies to insurgents, groups like the Arakan Army, that has carried out multiple terrorist attacks in Myanmar. Allegedly, these groups have tried to smuggle these weapons to terrorists on the India-Myanmar border. This poses a direct security challenge for India in the northeast. So this visit is the first time that an Indian foreign secretary is travelling with the army chief to a neighbouring country. In the month of August, India gave Myanmar $5 million. This was an annual contribution, part of a border area development program that began in the year 2012. So far, around 140 projects have been implemented in two regions of Myanmar with India's assistance. Today, India handed over a consignment of 3,000 vials of remdesivir to Myanmar. The Indian delegation also called on the Commander-in-Chief of the Defence Forces. Reports say the decision to send India's top diplomat with the military chief was taken at the highest level because India feels there is a need to strengthen this relationship on both the fronts. New Delhi is putting its weight behind the Quad and deepening its ties with the United States, Japan and Australia. Keeping allies on its side in the neighbourhood will only strengthen India's hand against China. Which brings us to something that we've said enough on this show. China cannot be trusted. Bangladesh may have finally realized this the hard way. Dhaka is crying foul after Beijing refused to carry out vaccine trials in Bangladesh. What does China want? It wants money. And where does this leave China's promise of 100,000 free vaccines to Bangladesh? Hanging by a thread.
Do not trust China.
Now, China says it has controlled the coronavirus. I would take that claim with a pinch of salt.
We have been telling you this time and again.
Chinese vaccine for free. Proceed at your own risk.
And we never run out of examples. The latest is Bangladesh. Beijing has cheated Dhaka. It had promised to carry out its vaccine trials in Bangladesh, but China has gone back on the promise. That Bangladesh is surprised is quite surprising. Here's the story. Chinese drug maker Sinovac Biotech has written a letter to Bangladesh. It is demanding that the government of Sheikh Hasina fund the trial of the vaccine in Bangladesh. Was this a part of the agreement? No. Bangladesh had approved human trials of China's COVID-19 vaccine on the 27th of August. The trial was supposed to begin by September end. And Sinovac was supposed to bear the cost of the trial. This agreement was part of China's vaccine diplomacy. It promised Bangladesh 100,000 doses of the vaccine. It promised the Philippines quick access to the drug. Latin America and Caribbean nations were promised $1 billion in loans to buy the medicine. China was preying on lower and middle income nations. For Xi Jinping, the vaccine diplomacy was about killing 3 birds with 1 stone. It ensured profit, soft power, and guinea pigs. China seems to have found its quota of guinea pigs outside Bangladesh. A vaccine needs to be tried on around 30,000 people for a global approval. Sinovac is carrying out its trials in Indonesia, Turkey, and Brazil. The Daily Star quoted a member of the Bangladesh Medical and Research Council as saying that China probably fulfilled its enrollment criteria for the approval of the vaccine. They are now placing the financial burden on Bangladesh. This quote sums up Chinese diplomacy. China was once promising free vaccines to Bangladesh. Now China is demanding money, even for its trials. We do not know how much. Bangladesh is crying foul. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Geneva has voted to introduce a minimum wage today, $25 an hour. The highest minimum wage in the world. That makes it more than $4,300 a month, more than what people earn in a whole year in 50 countries, 50. But the people of Geneva do not think it's a very big deal. This report tells you why.
25 United States dollars. That's the minimum you will get for 1 hour's work in Geneva. It is the highest minimum wage anywhere in the world, putting some of the wealthiest nations to shame. Will everyone in Switzerland get this minimum wage? The answer is no. Only the canton of Geneva has approved it. A special vote was held. 58% of voters endorsed the new minimum wage. It was backed by labor unions. They say the move will help tackle poverty. Why did Geneva need this law now? These images may have something to do with it. The date is 9th of May 2020. More than 1,000 people lined up to get free food parcels. blamed the Wuhan virus pandemic. It was pushing thousands of people into unemployment and poverty, so Geneva held a vote and settled on a new wage. How does it stack up against the rest of the world? It is more than twice what a person is paid in Australia, Luxembourg, France, and Germany, and more than 3 times the minimum wage in the United States. In India, the minimum wage is $0.375 per hour. It is in fact Geneva's third attempt to implement a mandatory minimum wage, $25 an hour, $4,347 a month. This is the minimum. It is higher than what people earn in an entire year in more than 50 countries. The figure of $25 an hour may appear staggering. Let's give you some perspective. Geneva is an expensive city, the 10th most expensive in the world. So for a typical household of 2 adults and 2 children, the poverty line is set at around $4,300. The new minimum wage is $4,347. It will only nudge workers slightly above the poverty line. By the city's standards, it's not an extravagant salary. Compare this to Australia. The minimum wage is around $12.6 an hour and close to $500 per month. The poverty line is set at $457. Again, just nudged above the bare minimum. In the United States, the gulf is even wider. The federal minimum wage is around $15,000 a year. That's more than $1,000 below the poverty line for a 2-person household. But many families manage to get by since states have set their own minimum wage. This brings us to an important question. Does the concept of a minimum wage even work? Economists are divided. Some of them argue that a living wage is more appropriate. While the minimum wage factors in the poverty line, the living wage is related to tangible things like food, shelter, and other essentials. It's more about what it takes to lead a quality life than just getting by on a bare minimum. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
One man dominated the news flow over the weekend, US President Donald Trump, a COVID denier whose re-election bid may have been clouded by the Wuhan virus. It's been 4 days since he tested positive. It's been 3 days since he's been hospitalized in Maryland. Elections are just 29 days away and there is no clarity on what's next. A lot of questions are being asked about Donald Trump's health. How is he? What medication is he being given? When exactly did he get infected? And is Trump infecting others at the hospital? Why is this question being asked? Because look at the president's actions. On Sunday, he went out for a little soiree. Trump risked his own life and that of others. He pulled off a drive-by for his supporters, who clearly did not mind gathering without masks to greet the president. They welcomed him with cheers and posters. A special mention for this poster. Trump was sent from God, it reads. A doctor pointed out how every single person in Trump's vehicle would now need to be quarantined for 14 days. Was it worth risking people's lives for political theatre? Experts called the spectacle insanity. Trump called it surprise, one that he announced through a Twitter video before heading out.
Reports from the doctors, this is an incredible hospital, Walter Reed. The work they do is just absolutely amazing, and I want to thank them all, the nurses, the doctors, everybody here. I've also gotten to meet some of the soldiers and the first responders, and what a group. I also think we're going to pay a little surprise to some of the great patriots that we have out on the street, and they've been out there for a long time, and they've got Trump flags, and they love our country. So I'm not telling anybody but you, but I'm about to make a little surprise visit, so perhaps I'll get there before you get to see me.
Meanwhile, the questions around Trump's health are growing. How is the president coping with the Wuhan virus? If you go by his Twitter feed, it's business as usual. The president has tweeted around 24 times in 24 hours. From stock market to approval ratings and tax cuts, it's all there, except Trump is not speaking very much about his own health. As for the White House and the team of doctors treating him, they're sending mixed signals. Over the weekend, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows swung between claiming that the president's vitals are quote-unquote very concerning to later telling the press that doctors are very pleased with Trump's vital signs. Doctors have admitted that Trump had to be given supplemental oxygen.
Thursday night into Friday morning when I left the bedside, the president was doing well, with only mild symptoms, and his oxygen was in the high 90s. Late Friday morning, when I returned to the bedside, the president had a high fever, and his oxygen saturation was transiently dipping below 94%. Given these two developments, I was concerned for possible rapid progression of the illness. I recommended the president we try some supplemental oxygen, see how he'd respond. He was fairly adamant that he didn't need it. He was not short of breath. He was tired, had the fever, and that was about it. And after about a minute, on only 2 liters, his saturation levels were back over 95%.
What about the drugs? Trump is being given Regeneron's unapproved drug called Regencov 2. Apart from that, he's receiving zinc, vitamin D, famotidine, melatonin and aspirin. Now, doctors say Trump is being given dexamethasone, which is a steroid, for fighting his low oxygen levels. Now, experts say that this is not administered on a patient unless his or her situation is serious. But doctors treating the US president maintain that his health is improving and that the president could be released from hospital today. Trump supporters across the world are praying for his well-being. Let's bring you one such prayer meeting in Israel.
Mr. Moshe Leon, let us say the blessing for the President of the United States and we'll pray for his healing and success. May he who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, Moses, Aaron, David and Solomon, heal Donald John Trump, son of Fred, for whom we pray. On this merit, may the Holy One, blessed be he, be filled with mercy for him to recover, heal and get stronger.
There's a question that is being whispered in power corridors and sometimes being asked loudly in the media. When exactly did Donald Trump contract the Wuhan virus and when did they find out? Now, why is this question being asked? A lot of people who attended a particular event in the Rose Garden on the 26th of September have tested positive. The gathering for nominating Amy Coney Barrett as the next Supreme Court judge and a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The event was attended by 150 people. At least 8 of them have tested positive for the Wuhan virus. The numbers are going up, and the Rose Garden event is now being called a super spreader event. As for the White House, there are currently 11 positive cases, this including the Trumps, the President and the First Lady, US government officials and some senior advisors. And as we speak, I'm being told that the White House Press Secretary, Kelly McEnany, has just tested positive for the Wuhan virus. She is the 12th person in Trump's inner circle to test positive. Turkey and Saudi Arabia are in a bitter diplomatic battle. They're clamoring for the right to be called the leader of the Islamic world. But now political tensions between the two are spilling over into trade. Saudi business leaders are calling for a boycott of Turkish goods, a boycott that could mean trouble for President Erdogan.
The battle for supremacy in the Islamic world has entered a new frontier. Commerce. Saudi business leaders are urging citizens to boycott Turkish goods. The call has come from Ajlan Al-Ajlan, chairman of the Saudi Chamber of Commerce. He is urging citizens to boycott everything Turkish, from imports to investment and tourism. The reason, he says, is the continued hostility of the Turkish government against the Saudi leadership. Saudi Arabia has not confirmed reports of an informal boycott. But accounts from businessmen on either side tell the story. Saudi importers say that Turkish containers are often held at the port for months on end. Some say customs officials ask them to not import directly from Turkey. Over in Ankara, a Turkish lawmaker claims that exports from his country are being held at the Saudi border for longer than necessary. He described it as an informal embargo by Saudi Arabia. Tension between the two countries is nothing new. Now a reconciliation looks increasingly unlikely. On Thursday, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused Gulf countries of targeting Turkey. This is what he had to say, and I quote, "It should not be forgotten that the countries in question did not exist yesterday and probably will not exist tomorrow. However, we will continue to keep our flag flying in this region forever with the permission of Allah." Unquote. The murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi had plunged bilateral ties to a low point. Erdogan believes the hit was ordered by the Saudi royal family, possibly by the Crown Prince himself. Earlier this week, Turkey charged 6 Saudi nationals for Khashoggi's murder. The trial is largely symbolic, as none of the suspects are in Turkey. Another flashpoint has been the issue of normalizing ties with Israel. When the Abraham Accords were announced, Erdogan threatened to suspend ties with the UAE. Notwithstanding the fact that Ankara has had diplomatic relations with Israel for more than half a century. Under Erdogan, this dynamic has changed. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia's response to normalization deals has been more measured. So that brings us to where we are right now. A continued state of cold conflict. With Saudi Arabia possibly imposing an informal embargo, the impact of this blockade could be far-reaching, especially for Turkey. Saudi Arabia is Turkey's 15th biggest export market. In the current financial year, Turkey has sold goods worth $1.91 billion to Saudi Arabia. Compared to the previous year, that's a drop of almost 17%. Some of it can be attributed to the Wuhan virus pandemic, but data reveals a long-term trend. Over the last 5 years, Turkish imports have fallen gradually in response to rising political tensions. The informal boycott has been in place for much longer than noted. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan has intensified. The two sides are fighting over a breakaway region called Nagorno-Karabakh. Over the last few hours, Azerbaijani and Armenian forces exchanged heavy rocket and artillery fire. Azerbaijan has accused Armenia